I helped my widowed neighbor on a snowy night. Then she said, "At least come warm up inside." The night I found my widowed neighbor standing alone in the middle of a blizzard, I thought I was simply helping someone who needed a hand. I had no idea that 10 minutes in the freezing snow would change both our lives forever. She was standing beside her car with tears frozen on her cheeks, one hand gripping the door and the other trembling around a broken phone. Behind her, the road had disappeared beneath thick white snow, and the lights of her house flickered weakly in the distance. Then she looked at me with the kind of loneliness that makes a person forget their own problems, and everything inside me told me not to walk away. Before we continue, if you believe that kindness can give someone a second chance when life has taken almost everything from them, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Sometimes a small act of kindness becomes the beginning of a story we never expected. My name is Daniel, and at the time, I had been living alone for almost 2 years. I wasn't lonely in the dramatic way people imagine loneliness. I worked, paid my bills, went grocery shopping, watched television at night, and woke up every morning to the same alarm. But my house had become painfully quiet. My wife had left after years of a marriage that slowly turned into two strangers sharing the same rooms. We didn't have a terrible ending. Somehow, that made it worse. There was no villain to hate, no betrayal to blame, just two people who had stopped knowing how to reach each other. After she moved away, I stopped expecting life to surprise me. Then, 3 months earlier, a woman named Clara moved into the small house next door. She was in her early 40s, quiet and polite, with brown hair she usually tied behind her head and a habit of carrying grocery bags with both hands even when I offered to help. I eventually learned from a neighbor that Clara had recently lost her husband. His death had been sudden, leaving her with a house full of memories and a silence she wasn't prepared to live with. We rarely spoke beyond simple greetings, but I noticed things. Her porch light stayed on until sunrise. Her curtains were often closed. And sometimes, late at night, I saw her sitting alone beside the window with no television playing. That evening, the weather had changed faster than anyone expected. Snow began falling shortly after sunset, and within an hour the roads were almost impossible to see. I was shoveling the walkway when I noticed Clara's car turning into the street. It made it halfway toward her driveway before the wheels began spinning. She tried again, but the tires dug deeper into the snow. I grabbed my coat and rushed outside. When I reached her, she was struggling to open the driver's door because the wind kept pushing it shut. Her hands were shaking so badly that she could barely hold the handle. She tried to tell me the car had stalled, but the words came out broken. She had been stuck for nearly 20 minutes, and her phone battery was almost dead. I told her to stay inside the car while I called for help, but the engine wouldn't restart, and the cold was becoming dangerous. I pushed the car as she steered, but the snow was already above my boots. After several attempts, we managed to move it close enough to the edge of her driveway that she could reach her front door. I carried the bags she had bought earlier and followed her through the snow. Her house was only a few steps away, but that short distance felt like crossing an entire frozen world. When we finally reached the porch, Clara fumbled with her keys. She dropped them twice. I picked them up without saying anything. The second time, she looked at me, and I could see tears in her eyes. She opened the door, stepped inside, and then suddenly turned back toward me. Her voice was quiet as she told me that at least I should come inside and warm up. She said she couldn't let me stand outside after what I'd done. I almost refused. I had spent so long convincing myself that keeping distance from people was safer than becoming involved in their lives. But there was something about the way she said it. It wasn't flirtation. It wasn't obligation. It sounded like a person who desperately needed another human being in the room. So I stepped inside. Her house was warmer than I expected, but it didn't feel warm. It felt empty. There were photographs everywhere. Clara and her husband on a beach. Clara laughing beside a birthday cake. The two of them standing in front of the same house before the paint had faded. Their life was frozen in those photographs, while the woman standing beside me had been forced to keep moving. She handed me a towel and made tea. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table while the storm attacked the windows. At first, neither of us said much. Then she began talking about her husband. Not about how he died. Not at first. She told me how he used to leave the kitchen cabinet doors open. How he always bought the wrong brand of coffee. How he hummed terribly when he cooked. She laughed while telling me, but halfway through the story her smile disappeared. She admitted that she had been angry with him after he died. I didn't understand until she explained that she was angry because he had left her with all the ordinary things. The grocery shopping. The bills. The broken light in the hallway. The empty side of the bed. The decisions. The mornings. She said people came to funerals and told you that time would heal everything, but nobody explained what you were supposed to do with Tuesday afternoons when you suddenly realized the person you loved would never call again. I listened. That was all I could do. And perhaps that was exactly what she needed. Over the next few weeks, something small began to change between us. Not suddenly. Not like the movies. It happened through ordinary moments. I cleared the snow from her driveway after another storm. She left a cup of coffee on my porch the next morning. She asked if I needed anything from the grocery store. I fixed the loose railing on her steps. She brought over a plate of food because she had cooked too much. Neither of us called it friendship. But it was becoming one. Then, one Saturday morning, I noticed Clara standing outside with a cardboard box. She was trying to lift it into her car, but she couldn't manage it. I helped her, and I asked where she was going. She told me she was taking some of her husband's belongings to a charity center. I could see how difficult it was for her. She explained that she had been avoiding that box for nearly a year. Every time she opened it, she felt guilty. It seemed as if giving away his clothes meant giving away the last pieces of him. I told her that memories didn't live inside jackets or shoes. She looked at me for a long moment and said she knew that. But knowing something and being ready to believe it were two different things. That afternoon, we drove together to the charity center. When we returned, Clara stood in her driveway and cried. She told me she had expected to feel like she was betraying her husband. Instead, she felt like she had finally taken one small breath after holding it for a year. I didn't hug her immediately. I gave her the choice. She stepped forward herself. That hug lasted only a few seconds, but it carried more emotion than either of us could explain. Months passed. Winter slowly disappeared, leaving muddy sidewalks and the first green leaves of spring. Clara began opening her curtains again. She started attending a local book club. She planted flowers along her porch. I started cooking actual meals instead of eating whatever was easiest. We became part of each other's routines without realizing it. Then one evening, I received a call from Clara. Her voice sounded frightened. She told me she had found something in the attic. I went next door. She was holding an old envelope. Inside was a letter her husband had written shortly before his death but never given to her. She had found it tucked inside a box while cleaning. The letter wasn't long. He wrote about how much he loved her. He apologized for all the small things he had taken for granted. He said that if anything ever happened to him, he wanted her to keep living, even when living felt like the hardest thing in the world. Clara couldn't finish reading it. She handed it to me. I read the final lines silently. Her husband had written that he hoped she would one day find a reason to laugh again without feeling guilty. I looked at Clara, and she was crying. Then she smiled through her tears. She told me she thought she finally understood. The reason she had survived wasn't because she was supposed to forget him. It was because love wasn't meant to become a prison. That night, we sat on her porch until the sky turned dark. She told me she was afraid that moving forward meant leaving her husband behind. I told her that moving forward didn't mean walking away from the people we loved. Sometimes it meant carrying what they taught us into whatever came next. She reached for my hand. I held it. Neither of us said what we were thinking. We didn't need to. A year after that snowy night, another storm came. It wasn't as bad as the first one, but the streets were covered again. I was standing by my window when I saw Clara outside. She was laughing. Actually laughing. She was trying to build a terrible little snowman in the front yard, wearing a red scarf and gloves that were far too big for her. I walked outside and asked what she was doing. She smiled and said she was making up for all the winters she had spent afraid to enjoy. Then she threw a snowball at me. I threw one back. Soon we were both laughing like children while snow fell around us. And in that moment, I realized something. That night a year earlier, I thought I had rescued Clara from the snow. The truth was, she had rescued me from something much deeper. She had reminded me that life doesn't always give us back what we lose. Sometimes it gives us something different. Something unexpected. Something that doesn't erase the past but makes the future worth looking at again. I had helped a widowed neighbor on a snowy night because she was cold. She had invited me inside because she didn't want me to be. And somehow, between two lonely houses and one terrible winter storm, two people who had stopped believing in second chances found one together. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who may be going through a lonely season, and subscribe to the channel. You never know how much a simple message of kindness might mean to someone quietly struggling behind a closed door. And before the story ends, I want to ask you something special. Comment, kindness brings people back to life, if you believe one small act of compassion can change someone's entire future. Because sometimes the greatest miracles don't arrive with thunder or bright lights. Sometimes they arrive quietly. Sometimes they look like a neighbor walking through a snowstorm. Sometimes they sound like a simple invitation to come inside and warm up. And sometimes, without either person realizing it, that open door becomes the beginning of a brand new life.